You gonna cry in that Nissan or in that plane? Because being a pilot is in your future. Here's how to do S turns. And the S is for sensational. Let go. Sensational. Hey, one time we about to talk about them S turns. Understand why you're being asked to perform S turns. Again, nothing is aviation is by chance. The things that you're going to be asked to do en route to getting your license and of course staying proficient. There's a purpose and a reason for everything. And the purpose for this maneuver is simply to understand, do you know how to correct for the winds and give the appropriate inputs on the bank as you're rolling in and out with the aircraft and adjusting for the winds. It's all about wind correction and being able to control the aircraft. That's what you want to get out of this, and that's the objective. Let's get into that thing. Hey, let go. Boom. So check it. Two primary things to focus on so you can get through S turns, not just get through it, but thrive while doing it, is you want to focus on number one, being patient. It's all about being patient with the bank. Don't try to get from one point to the next very quickly. Let the plane just gradually do its thing as you patiently make these turns and make that nice S pattern. That's number one. Practice patience while you're executing this maneuver. The second thing that you want to focus on is it's always best to give little inputs in the beginning because you can always increase them versus you being overly aggressive in the very beginning, and then just to make up for it, now you have to do this real subtle shallow bank just so you don't tilt her off course or anything like that. It's kind of like, think about it like seasoning your food when you're cooking anything. You add a little bit of seasoning as you go and a little bit more and a little bit more as you're tasting it as you go. Because you can always add more to get it perfect the way that you like it. But what you don't want to do is dump a bunch of seasoning on at first. Now it's not a whole lot you can do to get rid of it if it becomes too salty or too spicy for you. It's hard to reverse it, but it's a lot easy to just add a little bit on. Think about that concept when you're doing these banks around that S turn. It's always easy to just add a little bit more, and be more aggressive as you progress along versus you added way too much in the very beginning. Now it's hard for you to take it away as you're going to be trying to do everything very shallow just so you can make the pattern and do it in a nice way. So remember those two things and you can S that thing up sensational all day long. Let go. Boom. So check it. You know the vibes. Before you start any maneuver, you want to do CAS. So make sure you run that CAS check, clearing turns, altitude, and then of course safety area. You always do CAS before you're doing any maneuver. So check it. You got it all set up. Everything is going lovely. Boom. Now you're getting rid of that ugly. You know what I'm talking about? One time. So you got that thing set up and you've picked a long straight area on the ground as your ground reference. That can be anything. That can be a freeway that's nice and straight and long. That can be railroad tracks that's nice and long. So you got that reference point on the ground. Boom. This is your reference point. This is you floating that thing through the air. You looking beautiful. You're looking good. So what you want to do, much just like the turns around a point, you want to do a wind check. You want to get a wind check first because you would like to start all of these ground maneuvers off with a tailwind. So make that your main point and your objective. Whenever you're doing any kind of ground maneuver, try to always start it off with a tailwind. That tailwind is going to help you kind of understand what the winds are doing. You're going to use that little extra help that you're getting from that tailwind to kind of set up that first turn, because that first turn that you're making your S turn pattern is going to dictate the pattern itself, because you want to make equivalent kind of loops when you make this S turn pattern. You don't want to say the top part of that S to be really big and the bottom part to be shallow and small, or the top part to be shallow and small and then the bottom part to be big. You want a nice equal kind of curvature motion throughout the entire S movement. That's what you're looking for. So you want to remember those two things. You want to remember the fact that you want a nice, smooth, equal pattern along the S, and you also want to never go straight and level except for when you're crossing over that point that you picked. So you don't want to be tagging along straight and level for the majority of this maneuver, because that's not what this maneuver is about. This maneuver is about being in bank, either a steep bank or a shallow bank at all times. And the only time that you're really straight and level is when you completely parallel to your point that's on the ground. That's the only time you want to be straight and level. And as soon as you're at that point, you want to immediately go into your other bank to continue the S pattern. So keep that in mind as you run that thing. So boom, check it. You all set up. You got your ground reference. You floating that thing in the air. You've done your cast. You got everything set up. Remember this, always aviate, navigate, and communicate in that order. So the main principle you want to keep in mind here is navigating and making this S pattern. That's one thing, but it's something that comes before that. And that something is you want to aviate. You want to make sure you're always maintaining your altitude and of course watching your airspeed and controlling nice smooth controls and a coordinated bank movement. That all goes into the point of aviate. So you always want to be aviating first, then navigate. The navigation is going to take care of itself. You're going to make a nice simple S pattern, but you got to aviate to get it nice and clean. So you starting that thing and you doing what you do, of course. Now you're going to be parallel. When you cross over that center point, now the clock starts for you. Begin that bank. Since you're starting with the tailwind, that tailwind is going to be pushing you past that point. And you don't want to go too far because remember, you don't want to make big looping movements on your first one because whatever pattern you start in the first one, you're going to have to do it on the second loop at the bottom of the S. So when you start at the top of that S, let that wind push you and then start your bank. If it's a tailwind, you're going to have to be a little bit steeper, but you want to keep it coordinated and you want to keep it there. Left aileron if you're turning left, left rudder, everything coordinated at all times when you're in the plane. Then you're coming around to the other point, you still banking, and you're not going to get parallel until you right back over that object that's on the ground reference that you were doing, whether that's the railroad track or freeway or whatever you were doing. That's the only time that you're parallel for just that second when you're crossing over, and then you go right back immediately into the next turn. On that next turn, since you're going to be faced with the headwind, you want to kind of come out a little bit, nice slow bank, slow, gradual, not as steep as you would be when you had a tailwind. You want to be a little bit more shallow and kind of judge it. Always be anticipating, looking ahead of the aircraft, turning and making the same kind of circular movement and motion that you made on the first loop of the S. And then you coming back around, and when you get to this point, you're going to be, of course, with that tailwind again, and you're not going to get parallel until you get ready to cross over that railroad track or that ground reference again. So when you're over that reference point, that's the only time you're straight and level. All the other times you're in some degree of bank, whether that's a steep bank or whether that's a shallow bank. So you're in constant bank movement because that's what this is all about. Remember the objective. Can you control the airplane with bank while also adjusting for the winds? That's the purpose and that's the objective here. As you're banking either steep or banking shallow, adjusting for the winds and keeping that nice smooth S pattern. When you make an S, just think about your handwriting. You don't of a nice beautiful S. Its curvature is even at the top and the bottom of that S. That's exactly what you want to make. Like someone who has incredibly great penmanship, and they write a nice smooth S where the top loop is just as equal to the bottom loop, versus it being the top is smaller and the bottom is big, or vice versa. You do not want that. You want a nice equal pattern. So you must practice patience. That's number one. You don't want to go banking too even, and then now you got to try to make up the ground for it so you can be straight and parallel when you get back over the rest over the point itself. And of course, you also want to make sure you're making those adjustments for the tailwind and the headwind. Tailwind is going to have you banking a little bit more steeper, and then of course a little bit more shallow on that headwind. But when you're doing it, always be anticipating, always be looking ahead of where you're going to make that nice curvature and have those reference points as you're coming around. And even on this movement right here, even if you feel like, hey, I'm going too fast in this bank, and if I continue at this same rate, I'm not going to be straight and level. I'm going to be beyond straight and level when I get to the reference point. Then start to level off and shallow the bank more, even if you're just doing a 5-degree bank, long as you're not straight level. Just even so, if you were real stiff and you feel like, oh, I gotta adjust this, level it off a little bit. Keep it going, make that nice circle, and then come back around for that S pattern as you continue on. That's the main objective that you want to get out of S turns. Doing all of this while aviating, staying on altitude. Very, very important. Making sure you're not losing altitude or gaining altitude. You're staying exactly where you need to be with your altitude adjustments, as well as with your airspeed. Always navigating second after you aviate first. Boom! The major key and secret to S turns is when you're straight and level and you're getting ready to start that bank that's headed into the headwind, you got to be extremely patient. Because just think about what the headwind is doing. It's slowing you down. So if you try to rush that movement, you're going to end up cutting yourself short and not getting the same symmetrical kind of S shape that you're looking for. So you got to be, when that tailwind was working for you, so it helped you time it a little bit in the beginning. That's why you always want to do a wind check. That's all why you always want to start with that tailwind. So you made that nice first shape of the S, nice and beautiful. But now when you cross straight and level over your reference point, you're getting ready to go into a direct headwind. And so you got to be aware of the fact that it's going to slow me down. So let me get out a little bit with maybe just a little slight movement before I start that really nice strong bank to get myself back to where I need to be. So be patient when you're going into that headwind and let the S shape develop on that second loop. And then if you do that, you'll be fine. Don't forget to like this video, comment on this video, share this video, and subscribe to this channel. I am Donovan Batiste. Hey, this is Leadership Mindset, a place where you can come for free and fun information for everything that you need to know to become a pilot. And if you're already a pilot, this info and these videos can be just a nice fun way to stay proficient. Love you one time. Subscribe to this channel. Hey!